I'm here today with Ed Galindo, Dr. Ed Galindo from the North American Native Research and Education Foundation, or NANREF, and we're going to talk today about some of the things that we learned through the workshop series that we did for gatherings to transcend barriers to success for this generation and those to come. So Ed, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of background.
Sure, I'm happy to do that, Sasha, and thank you for coming over today. I wanted to base this discussion on pathway essays that my good friend Bob had suggested that we do, and he had some questions on what we learned about the gathering, and so I'm going to emphasize several points. I want to start off by saying I was pleasantly surprised that when we started to compile the data and talk about our results, that I found a publication from the National Congress of American Indians, published in 2009, and we were right in line with what they had predicted. Their subject matter was foundations of research for an American Indian community, just what we were talking about. And so I want to talk a little bit today of those highlights and then perhaps answer any questions you may have or add to the discussion. So I'll start off with, why would NANREF want to be involved in this process to begin with? There's a reason for what we do. And so the reason was I wanted to introduce the American Indian research community that had PhDs or masters in the STEM field to the larger community. That was the onset of the meeting, and so all the presenters were from that caliber. And as we went through the gathering, these are some of the highlights I just want to talk about. That we wanted to validate the validity of indigenous knowledge. That came up time and time again. And so indigenous knowledge, it's as old as American Indian culture, and it's based on the collective wisdom of ancestors and interrelationships in diverse conditions. It's been tested time and time again. I like to call it timeless knowledge versus traditional knowledge. I was at a conference one time and the question was brought up, which tradition are you talking about? And I thought that was a valid question, but I like to think of it as timeless knowledge that's been tried and tried again. So, yeah, go ahead.
Not discounting the knowledge from those elders in the tribes who have experiences that are not necessarily based on academic or the traditional academic
that's right.
route or background, but the traditions of the tribes and what has been passed down.
Yeah, that's right. What's interesting about that is that they're mainly traditions of survival, and all of those do weave into the STEM field that we're talking about. How to, for example, how to dry meat, why that's important, how to prepare leather, why you smoke it versus not for waterproofing. And so they're not so technically minded, but that's not how they were thought of to begin with. It was a survival modality. So anyway, that's kind of interesting how that worked out. And through our conference, we gleaned that several of our presenters wanted to make sure that indigenous knowledge was of equal weight to Western science, and that indigenous and Western science have a long history of borrowing from one another. One is not more superior than the other. And so I have an example here. Western society would borrow from indigenous, and some examples are foods, and other examples of medicine. And the tribal people borrowed from the Western knowledge, examples, firearms and modern trucks. And so you can borrow from each other, and that's how it should be. I don't think one should be more superior than the other. The other theme that came was culture. Culture matters. And culture, I'll define that as is customs and experience and social ways, behaviors that provide a lens to see through the world of a different culture. That's what culture is about. And everything that involves people involves culture. You can't have culture if you're talking about people. As a matter of fact, the next point emphasizes that, is that research is not culturally neutral. And in fact, if you try to have culture taken out of that, it's really harmful for indigenous people. And I got an example for that. Diabetes is high in American Indian people, and if you just focus on the nutritional biochemistry of maybe the nutrients of the food aren't adding to the health of the people. If you just focus on that and don't look at the historical, emotional, social, and economic relationship of food and well-being, you miss a bigger picture of knowledge. And that's how food is viewed with the indigenous community. Isn't just a food. There's lots of other things that are associated with food. So that's an example there. Another good point that came from our discussions is tribal stewardship and the relationship to research. And the stewardship means responsible to the needs of the community. What does that mean? Well, it means why are you doing a project that really won't benefit the tribe or yourself? And there may be some examples of that. I couldn't think of some, but I thought of many that would benefit the tribe or everything, especially around here, the research with natural resources, salmon, timber, water, all those are viable. And the other thing, Sasha, that we learned is that what is good for American Indian people is good for the whole. It isn't just good for Indian people, it's good for everybody else.
And there's the aspect of bringing it back to the people as well, not just doing the research and having it exist in some publication somewhere where it doesn't come back and have an effect on the people's lives.
That is so well. I mean, that's a good segue to the next one I want to talk about, and expressing tribal sovereignty in research, and understanding that the how to regulate research, and understanding the data, and understand where that goes. And absolutely right, coming back to the tribe and sharing what you have. So I'm going to summarize 5 core research values just for us to talk about. 1 is indigenous knowledge is valid and should be valued. 2, research is not culturally neutral. 3, responsible stewardship includes tasks of learning how to interpret and understand data and research. 4, tribes must exercise sovereignty when conducting research and managing data, including bringing it back to the people. And 5, research must benefit Native people. Those are kind of the themes that we learned about. And in that theme, there are some things that, to answer Bob's question, what we learned, that I've learned and have always learned about, is a quote from Elder Morris Manyfingers from Alberta, Canada, who said, "Teachers don't teach a subject, they teach people. And to teach people, they must make an honest effort to get to know them, spend time with them." That's what NANRAF is about. We're about knowing our students, knowing our community, spending time with them, and getting to know them as people. And so, that's one of the big points that came away from this conference, is get to know people.
It would need to have that trust and the rapport
Exactly.
with the people to really find out what is going to benefit them and what they would like to have researched, really. I mean, what in their community, what problems in their community would they like to have answers for?
And to involve them in the research, not just list them as we involved a tribe in our research and go on from there, but we have tribal members that are helping us conduct research.
They are huge stakeholders in this.
Yeah, exactly right. And finally, well, not finally, but the next point is what has guided NANRAF's involvement has been a quote from Homer O'Neill, Native Pathways, a book called Native Pathways, which I obtained from Sage Kootenai Library in 2004. And it talks about, I like this quote in there, seeking ways in which the scholarly discourse can contribute to the ongoing exercise of self-determination. So this conference exactly exemplifies that point, is that we want to introduce scholars. We want to talk about what research means through Indigenous lens, and we want to contribute to the ongoing self-determination of the tribe and tribal entities.
Empower them to make changes and
make
a
changes
difference
for themselves. And so now I'll go to lastly. Lastly, the big take-home message that I learned from the gathering is hope. And I was so pleased to hear the presenters present and talk about research and talk about engagement and have active discussions, what we're doing. But hope for the future. And I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but I want to talk about the American Indian Consortium. It's a cool design that some Navajo students helped make me, and it's a corn plant that has, I can show the cameras, has little ears of corn, and one of them is a rocket because I was involved with some NASA projects. But this unifies what we're trying to do, and I presented this to our group of having a unified group to move on in the future, a consortium that involves NANRAF, that will involve any other tribe or any other tribal entity or effort that's moving forward would fall under this consortium. So it wouldn't be just one individual, it would be many individuals, just like ears of the corn of the plant. And so this came out of our conference. This is a logo we're going to keep and use, and I really appreciate it and the students' effort on that.
Designed by tribal members.
Yep.
And
to talk about hope. And I learned also that we had that hope, but we have native publications that are going currently. This will be written as more of a publication form for a native website that we're gonna join. Plus our gathering notes will go in there, and so it will go to a native website, Dr. Davis's website. And he lives in Fort Hall, Idaho. And the other things that go in there is the notes that Dr. Shockey took on the evaluation. It's 10 or 12 pages of nice reflections. And one of the things that they talked about was the National Science Foundation. And I won't go into his report in so much detail because you can read that, and which is well written. But we had a presenter talk about some people coming to the reservation, a Navajo reservation from the National Science Foundation. They brought great ideas, but they never came back. That's what the presenter said. They brought great ideas, but we never seen them again. And so, as an example for not only the National Science Foundation, but other funding agencies, if you're going to engage in people, come back. It's a long-term engagement. Most proposals are thought of in 3 to 5 years, and then they're over with. But the relationship with people don't end in 3 or 5 years. It's once you get to know people, it's a lifetime relationship. And so that was brought up also, and then you can read more on Dr. Shockey's evaluation. But help with writing proposals also is brought up by this presenter, because they have good ideas, but maybe they don't have their writing skills that are so competitive. So having workshops on the reservation of help writing, maybe we get more proposals to the National Science Foundation and NIH and all the others that are seeking funds. And lastly, the very last thing that came from, I think, NANRAF and the students was that the faculty, the American Indian community that are the graduate students need to help educate the faculty administration of who and what American Indians are. Who else can help educate them but the students themselves? They are highly educated people, and most are open to new ideas, and so it wouldn't take much of an effort to help educate them of who American Indians are, what American communities are about. And at Idaho State's example, because I can pick on them as being an alumni of that school, they're only 8 miles from the reservation. Sometimes I think that distance is 800,000 miles, because they're so apart in thought. But those paths could come closer together if we start talking and listening and understanding who we are, neighbors, because they're the neighbors. That for the tribe, ISU's a neighbor, and ISU, the tribe's a neighbor. Let's just talk about being a good neighbor. You don't have to talk about research. You don't have to talk about numbers, going to school. Just being a good neighbor. And so that all falls under to the last point I was making of hope. And that's what I glean from our gathering is hope. And I see a bright future for our both communities, because the presenters were bright and excited, and the faculty at Idaho State, they're excited to hear new ideas and work with their neighbors. And so that's what I've gleaned. To answer Bob's, at the very beginning, Bob's questions on experiences. Well, those are my experiences. But what we learned at the gathering, I think it's quite clear in our essay, oral essay, what we learned. And I appreciate your help, Sasha. We could never pulled it off without your expertise in our gathering. And so, do you have anything to add?
I am happy to help. I think that I don't know that you missed anything. I think we hit on a lot of the great lessons that were learned from the gathering. You talked about data sovereignty, and I would say making that information available to the tribes, especially when the research has been done with their data and their help, that it shouldn't exist in some publication that costs $30 to access the article. I think that making that data disseminated among the tribes through websites like Dr. Davis's is going to be very beneficial, and also provide that path forward and increase the hope among tribes that the research is being done to benefit them.
Yeah. I think we had a good participation. I know Sasha worked very hard getting the word out, as Dr. Bob did, and everybody else on the team. We all let people know about it, and we had some really good questions asked. I've had some really good comments about what they liked about it, and glad we got together. And so the whole thing was a good feeling, and well worth the effort. I think that's it.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your day, Dr. Galindo, to synthesize some of the things that we learned from the gathering, and hopefully it will benefit everyone as we move forward.
Dr. Sasha, the same. Thank you.
Thank you.